Meka, why did you bring a stove to our recording session?
Huh? Oh, I always have it. It's in my backpack.
What? I thought that backpack was just full of personal development books.
No, it's my emergency bag.
Why?
Because there's so many things that could happen. Like, what if our clean water supply gets disrupted? The financial crisis causes extreme social disorder. The government starts rounding up trans people. The zombie apocalypse.
You're worrying too much, kiddo. Meka, have you considered just smiling more?
What? That's ridiculous.
Well, that's what this book from the 1940s says might help.
The 1940s, I think they had very different worries.
Oh, maybe we should look at it a little more closely. What do you think?
All right.
Okay. Welcome to Thriving Between the Lines, the podcast that examines personal development books through the lens of intersectionality, making self-help content more accessible and relatable. I am life coach and anxiety sponge, Leslie Crudup Villa Garcia.
And I'm Meka, a recovering doomsday prepper.
And together, we're not just reading between the lines, we're thriving between the lines. All right, and we're coming to you from Mianjin, or Brisbane, in Australia, land of the Yagara and Turrbal people, where sovereignty has never been ceded, and it always was and always will be Aboriginal land. Meka, can I tell you a fun fact about this book?
Yeah, please do.
This was the very first personal development book I ever purchased.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's, surprising.
Yeah. And it's funny because this was in 2006?
Yeah.
No, 2007. I was in Cambodia. I was in Siem Reap.
Yep.
I was feeling very anxious. I was feeling lonely. And I found like one of those book exchange places that also kind of sold books as well. Mm-hmm. And I was like, all right. I'm gonna have a look at this. Which is kind of funny, I think, given the circumstances. But Meka, tell our listeners, what book are we talking about today?
How to Stop Worrying and Start Living. Time-Tested Methods for Conquering Worry by Dale Carnegie.
Yeah, the famous Dale Carnegie, who also wrote, famously, How to Win Friends and Influence People. Yeah, we won't get into that one yet.
He looks like from 1,000,000 years ago, based on his photo.
Something like that. So what was your overall kind of thinking around this book?
I wasn't really sure what to expect, but it's kind of got some basic points that do make sense, but also super simplified some stuff and was very problematic. I mean, not surprising considering his age.
Yeah. We do have to note, of course, that the version that I read is the one that was revised for the 1980s.
Ooh.
Yeah. So it was originally published in 1944.
Mm-hmm. So the war wasn't over yet. Second World War.
And I haven't done like an exact side-by-side comparison between that original edition and this 1980s version, but I have looked at some comparisons from other content creators. But one thing that was very clear was that for the elements in this book to be relevant at all today, it would need a complete 2024 revision because no. I really struggled with that sentence.
The whole book gave me the vibes of like stop, drop, and like cover.
Duck and cover.
Stop, duck, and cover. The like Vault Boy kind of like, it's all right, just an apocalypse. Don't worry about it. Everything's fine.
Yeah. When I looked at this again, I was actually prepared to be a lot more annoyed by it than I actually was.
Yeah.
Only because as much as there are things in here that I had to scoff at, and we will get into that, I was actually kind of surprised because this is a personal development classic.
one of the originals.
Yeah, one of the OG self-help works that modern day personal development writers draw very heavily upon. Dale Carnegie is seen as kind of a granddaddy in this genre and in the business world and in the success world, just quoted all over the place. But there's some things that he's done better in this book than writers of today do in terms of inclusion.
Right.
Which is really ironic. That's not to say that he was a early model for intersectionality by any stretch of the imagination. But there's some things in here that we can draw upon and reflect on through an intersectional lens because they've kind of been presented to us back before there was more of an understanding of how to talk about different facets of society.
Yeah, I think if you imagine it's a 1940s person talking like that, you're like, wow, progressive. Kind of today, I'm a bit like, oh, I know what you meant.
Yeah. So, shall we dive in?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, let's do it. There is so much to say about this book, and naturally, we're not going to be able to talk about everything. So it's divided into 8 sections. There are 28 different chapters, and then a collection of stories from other people to round off the last section. So because we can't dive into absolutely everything, we are going to focus on areas that really stood out to us.
Yes.
As people who are neurodivergent, who have suffered with chronic health issues, have different experiences related to disability and everything else, and a lot of the people in our life as well.
Yeah.
Intersectionality, in other words.
What? Us? Talking about intersectionality.
Oh, who do we think we are? A bunch of queers. All right. So, the key focus areas that we are going to dive into are crowding out worry by staying busy. Because apparently that's how we stop worrying and start living. We're going to talk about curing your body through positive thinking.
I have some stuff to say about that.
Yeah. We'll talk about it. We're going to talk about making the best out of bad situations. There's this whole section about making lemonade out of lemons. And we're going to talk about one chapter title that stood out for me immediately. How to Cure Depression in 14 Days.
Oh my gosh. The solution.
Yeah.
And we've had it since the 40s. What have we been doing?
I have no idea. So, there will be other sections and topics related to the book that come up, but those are going to be the things that we're going to try to focus on the most. So how does that sound, Meka?
Sounds good.
Excellent. So let's talk about crowding out worry by staying busy. Now, one of the overarching themes in this book is that if you keep yourself so busy that you don't have time to worry, then you're never going to worry about anything.
Yeah, very much the main thing that I was getting out of it. Even though there are some valid points. Just like, no, I have tried it. I have tried.
Yeah. Now, before I read this section, content warning, it does involve the death of a family member.
Violent death.
Yes. So just keep that in mind before we dive in. All right. So he writes, any psychiatrist will tell you that work, keeping busy, is one of the best anesthetics ever known for sick nerves. Henry W. Longfellow found that out for himself when he lost his young wife. His wife had been melting some sealing wax at a candle one day when her clothes caught on fire. Oh, God. Longfellow heard her cries and tried to reach her in time, but she died from the burns. For a while, Longfellow was so tortured by the memory of that dreadful experience that he nearly went insane. But, fortunately for him, his 3 small children needed his attention. Very interesting choice of words there, I think, using fortunately. Okay, but this is where it really gets into the meat of this whole idea. In spite of his own grief, Longfellow undertook to be father and mother to his children. He took them for walks, told them stories, played games with them, and immortalized their companionship in his poem The Children's Hour. He also translated Dante, and all these duties combined kept him so busy that he forgot himself entirely and regained his peace of mind.
Yeah, just lose who you are.
Yeah, so, yeah, what do you think, Meka?
I definitely admire people who can pull themselves together in a time of emergency or a time of great need to look after the people who need them. Like, his kids needed him, and you have to pull it together for your kids.
Yep.
Like, there isn't an option. Their childhood only happens once. I admire that. It's not a good thing that, like, he lost who he was. He had to put aside his needs, his well-being, and by the sounds of it, never actually came back to it, didn't get his kids off to college and then go, well, now I can actually take care of me and sort this out.
And this is the problem with a lot of people in that kind of situation. I understand that grief, in particular, can throw people into a tailspin.
Yeah.
And sometimes losing oneself in action and in care for other people can be part of healing from grief. But it's this idea that being praised for just completely losing yourself, that's not cool.
I am familiar with this method.
Yeah.
I think we all are. But it's a Band-Aid. And it is a necessary Band-Aid. Like, you still put a Band-Aid on a wound or a bandage when it first happens.
Yeah.
And while it's healing. But without actually applying medicine, it's quite likely to get infected. You got lucky people that can get through it without an infection just by their luck. But a lot of us used to die from infection.
Yes.
And emotionally, it happens too. If you stick on that Band-Aid and just expect everything to go fine, it's rolling the dice. And even with those who get through the first bit, they might have severe disability. And I see that in a lot of older people where this rotten old Band-Aid is just starting to fester and it starts falling apart.
Yeah.
This method doesn't work forever. It's worth mentioning, like, the high male suicide rate and early deaths from stress and heart disease and these sorts of things.
Yeah.
Which, to me, is just the end game of this method.
Yeah. And in this chapter, there are a lot of different examples presented. It's a bit repetitive in this sense, where it's like, here's the story of someone who went through something bad. So they made themselves so busy that they didn't have time to think about what they were worried about. And then they were magically cured. It's just that over and over and over again.
And he just conveniently ignores all of the people who tried these sort of things and failed. I could easily, I'm sure, go back and find many an example of people from the same era who didn't survive, who did get that mental infection, that they rolled the dice and didn't win.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've definitely been through periods in my life where it has been very healing to lose myself in my work or focus on my work so that I'm not super anxious about something that I don't really have control over. And even distracting yourself can be really useful, but like you said, it's a Band-Aid solution. It can't be the thing that you go to that's going to make everything better.
Yeah. Well, he even mentions in it World War II doctors prescribing keep 'em busy as a cure for what is essentially PTSD. They call it psychoneurotic.
Yes. Yeah. Let's read that section, actually.
I'll start here. Army psychiatrists performed such miracles during the Second World War. When men came out of battle so shaken by the experience that they were called psychoneurotic, army doctors prescribed keep 'em busy as a cure.
That's probably how they said it too.
With a cigarette hanging out their mouth. Every waking minute of these nerve-shocked men was filled with activity, usually outdoor activity such as fishing, hunting, playing ball, golf, taking pictures, making gardens, and dancing. They were given no time for brooding over their terrible experiences.
So no time to process what they had just been through.
Yeah, and they just kept doing that until they died.
Fantastic. Sounds great.
These are these, like, old blokes that, you know, they got to retirement and then they just lost their minds. And so they had to, like, be, oh, quick, give them all these activities to do, keep them busy.
Yeah.
There's too much time to think.
Yeah. It definitely is a stark contrast to what we've come to understand in the decades since about rest.
Yeah. There's been a lot of psychological research since those psychiatrists, psychologists were prescribing that.
Yeah.
And, I mean, that's to say the book may have been useful at its time, but it's still being used and sold today, and so it needs, like, a very big update.
You and I need to do the 2024 version of this book.
Yeah, because it's got useful bits.
Yeah. Also, with an emphasis on the idea that in order to start living, you don't actually have to stop worrying.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, the main problem even with the title of this book. It's like, eliminate worry. Why should we eliminate worry?
I mean, if you eliminated worry, you wouldn't take care of the things that needed taken care of.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, it's only worry that makes me pay bills. The worry of my power getting cut off.
Yeah. Managing how we respond to those worries would be a much healthier way forward.
Yeah.
Because that's where strategy lives.
Yes.
That's where you can build the action plans to overcome the obstacles that are in front of you. It's not about just saying, like, oh, I'm too busy to notice these obstacles.
Yeah. Ignoring problems doesn't make them go away.
Yeah, I have tried that so many times. Like, sticking my fingers in my ears and just saying, oh my gosh, please, all the bad people, just go away. And then I pull my fingers out of my ears, like, ah, shit, Trump's still here.
They've multiplied.
Yeah. But anyway.
Yeah, I have quite a lot of experience with living with people with PTSD, specifically CPTSD. My partner has suffered from it quite severely over the last few years, and it's affected everyone in the household. Like, it's a distressing condition, very much so for the person with it and even the people around them. There's a reason a lot of marriages and things break down with, like, war veterans. It's just a constant thing. Like, there is, and it is this. It's the only thing that we could do to stop it from being really bad was distraction, constant distraction. But people need to sleep. People need rest. They need mental rest.
Yeah.
If you never have a quiet moment, if you have to keep your mind busy all the time, and I mean, my mind is busy all the time, but the fatigue will eventually get you. You can't live like that forever. He even mentions using it as an anesthetic for sick nerves.
Yeah.
I don't particularly want to get into the details. It's a bit distressing. Let's just say breakdowns and the episodes. You may have seen movies where they reenact that sort of thing. It's no joke. It's like that.
Yeah.
And it's scary at times. It's incredibly distressing.
Yeah.
And that's me as an observer. Imagine being the person with it like that.
Yeah.
So the busyness was the only relief for him, for us. And so keeping him busy was an anesthetic, a quiet, like just a moment of peace or a moment of not distress. I wouldn't even call it peace.
Yeah. And I imagine, like, you had to be quite mindful of the kind of busyness, right? Because what I don't like about the way it's framed in this book is just kind of like, just do anything. Just keep yourself busy. In the beginning of the chapter, he talks about a family who lost children, but, you know, luckily they had one left that they could pour all their energy into. And it's like, well, hang on a minute. Like, speaking as a parent myself as well, I know what it's like to be super, super, super busy and still have plenty of time to worry.
Oh, yeah.
So I feel like what he's offering us is a recipe for burnout.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so many of the activities he mentions, they're not activities that don't leave space for my brain to be working.
Like, what kinds of activities?
like you say, gardening or fishing or like the biggest sitting and thinking and like mulling over things sort of activities.
Yeah.
And for me, the things I have to do is keeping my brain busy.
Yeah.
It's like reading, studying, inventing.
Yeah.
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 Things that take up the brain space.
Yeah. And of course, at the time that he wrote this book, and even in the 1980s when it was, revised, the version that we're working from, there was so little known about like neurodivergence, about autism, about ADHD, and about how thoughts can kind of sit in your brain. I kind of wonder what Dale Carnegie would think about the fact that even when I am busy, I still have to walk around with my AirPods in. Like when I'm really trying to focus on something, not always, but a lot of the time, I can't really fully focus on what I'm trying to do unless I've got something else playing in my ears.
Same.
Yeah. And it's soothing for me.
I worked out. It's that we used to be in big social groups all the time. To me, it's the like social chatter around me.
Yeah.
I get more done in a little like quiet crowd.
Yeah.
I think it's also important to mention in this section,
Yeah.
men's sheds. Men's sheds were started as a mental health activism, a mental health service, basically. It's a workshop with tools for woodworking and such, where men go to do those things. They only really talk about making things, doing stuff, but the whole point was that it was for vets and things like that to go and talk to other people because they would get being isolated. They would sit at home, mull, and it literally is like an entire a nationwide keep them busy mental health thing. The funny thing is, it actually works in that situation because it's the social part, not the keep them busy. It's making them think it's the keep them busy.
Yeah.
But actually, it gives them space to talk to other people. Other people have been through similar things, have stresses in life, and relate to people who are similar.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like a bit of a bait and switch. I mean, it's
a healthy bait and switch.
It's a healthy bait and switch.
Yeah.
It's kind of an evolution of this keep 'em busy theory. Other thing important to mention in this section with intersectionality, people with autism are so much more prone to PTSD and CPTSD particularly, like those little things that people don't think are traumatic.
Yeah.
Life is traumatic for neurodivergent people. We go out into society and get told our being is wrong.
Yeah.
Existing is wrong.
We have to apologize for it constantly. We have to make other people comfortable with the fact that people like us exist.
Yes.
Friggin' exhausting!
So exhausting.
Yeah.
And all of that worry when you get home and go over every social situation, go, oh my God, did I mess up? I think I messed up. I think I said the wrong thing.
Who did I forget to say thank you to? Who did I not make enough eye contact with? Blah, 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 blah. It's like...
I just turned an awkward social situation where I made an assumption about a couple and they weren't actually a gay couple. One was straight, and then I made like weird comments about him having a gay voice. And I've just been dying about it for the last month.
Oh my
on the inside.
Yeah. Have you thought about just keeping yourself busy, Meka? You're just not busy enough. You need to grind.
I don't do anything.
Find something and grind. Find something to grind on, Meka.
That might distract me.
Don't mind if I do. See, we're feeling better already.
Yeah, keeping myself busy in that way. Keeping myself.
Now, there are still some useful aspects about this whole thing. Because I think what he's getting at as well is that in order to ease some of the worry and anxiety that we might have, this sort of general feeling, it's helpful to feel like you've got purpose in your day. That, again, is very different from just keeping busy for busy's sake.
Yes.
And I think especially for people who have issues around job security or housing insecurity, for people who are suffering from various ailments, people who have disabilities that prevent them from
achieving the basics of life.
Yeah, achieving the basics of life without assistance. People from marginalized communities, jumping straight ahead to busy mode could be very harmful. Even people with a great degree of privilege, jumping straight into action without taking the time and checking in to see what will be the most beneficial, most nourishing action, the most purposeful, since we're talking about purpose. If you don't do those things, it can send you down a really dark path that you might not even recognize until you get there.
It's really hard to act. You are busy. Like, when you're at a disadvantage, you're busier than other people.
Yeah.
But finding purpose in that busy, when your busy is getting out of bed and doing the washing and being able to get some groceries, that doesn't feel super purposeful. It feels like you're not even getting to the start line.
Yeah.
And I have done that for a lot of my life, and it sucks you dry.
Yep.
Like, you just start feeling like a shell.
Yeah.
And so I think the big takeaway from this chapter is that the big difference is being able to be busy with meaningful action. Meaningful busyness can be beneficial.
Yeah.
It can give you that drive that then gives you a reason to look after yourself and to go back and actually do the work.
Yeah. And he does kind of flirt with that idea a bit later in the book, but in a way that I feel is very misplaced.
Okay.
Yeah. The whole, like, what is purpose? And sometimes to find that thing that's going to feel purposeful and meaningful in an authentic way requires slowing the heck down and doing the work to unpack your core values, your character strengths. And if worry enters the mind during that stage, like, that's okay, because we can build strategies to navigate around those worries rather than trying to flush them out. Because for a lot of us, we can be very busy and still very freaking worried. All right. Chapter 12 is called 8 Words That Can Transform Your Life.
Simple.
Yeah, only 8. I mean, I know words. Like, I have the best words.
You have a degree in words.
Yes. Like, I English great. So, here are the 8 words, right? And these come from Marcus Aurelius.
Recent.
All right, the 8 words that can determine your destiny. Our life is what our thoughts make it. All right. Now, I'm going to read you 2 little paragraphs that explain what he's on about when he presents this to us. Yes, if we think happy thoughts, we will be happy. If we think miserable thoughts, we will be miserable. If we think fear thoughts, we will be fearful. If we think sickly thoughts, we will probably be ill. If we think failure, we will certainly fail. If we wallow in self-pity, everyone will want to shun and avoid us. You are not, said Norman Vincent Peale, you are not what you think you are, but what you think you are. We will talk about Norman Vincent Peale at some other stage. He wrote The Power of Positive Thinking.
Oh.
Yeah. Okay. Am I advocating an habitual? It's one of those an habitual Pollyanna attitude toward all our problems? No, unfortunately, life isn't so simple as all that, but I am advocating that we assume a positive attitude instead of a negative attitude. In other words, we need to be concerned about our problems, but not worried. Okay. What is the difference between concern and worry? Let me illustrate. Every time I cross the traffic-jammed streets of New York, I am concerned about what I am doing, but not worried. Concern means realizing what the problems are and calmly taking steps to meet them. Worrying means going around in maddening, futile circles. I'm going to read you the first sentence of the next paragraph. A man can be concerned about his serious problems and still walk with his chin up and a carnation in his buttonhole. Now, the reason I needed to read that sentence was, I tell you what, it took me reading it again to recognize that he said buttonhole. And I was like, wait, what? Huh?
Right.
And then I was like, oh, okay. All right. I'm with you now. So yeah, this is the thing. In that first paragraph, if we think sickly thoughts, we'll become ill. If we think failure, we'll fail. If we think happy thoughts, we'll be happy. Given how early in the world of personal development writing this book has come, we can look at that and say, and not think like, oh, but that's what everyone keeps saying, blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay, but this is kind of an origin story for a lot of what we understand today about toxic positivity.
Yeah. What he's describing there is rumination, which is different to me to worry. And that could be a language difference over 80 years, which I think is very important. So concern maybe is what I call worry.
Yeah.
And another reason why old books can need revisions.
Yeah. But the thing that really bothers me is when we think about our thoughts making our reality, there's a lot of bypassing that comes through in a lot of today's personal development media that oversimplifies very potentially complex issues. It's like, if we think sickly thoughts, we will probably be ill. It's like, well, okay, I know some of the happiest people in the world who get struck down by horrible diseases, and it wasn't because they weren't thinking happy enough thoughts.
There is important distinction to be made in that there is some mind-body connection in that you can actively improve your physical health with certain thought patterns and certain, but it's very restricted in what it can achieve. It's not going to stop serious illnesses that are caused by something totally different.
Yeah, exactly. There is definitely validity to, say you've got two people who have like the same diagnosis, a very challenging physical condition, and one person looks at it with a very pessimistic attitude. Another person looks at it with a more optimistic attitude, in a way that impacts how they move forward in their own recovery, in their treatment of those conditions. Or that is an example of how a difference in attitude can bolster physical healing, right? But too many people have run with this idea of, oh, if we just think happy thoughts, everything will be fine. We don't need medications. We don't need radiation if we've got cancer. We don't need anything like that. We just need to think positively.
Yep.
And there's so much shame that gets attached to not thinking positively.
Yes.
And blaming people for their own physical ailments or clinical depression and things like that, because they just need a mindset shift. They just need to change their attitude. It's like, okay, we need to be careful of how we talk about these things, because it's not that simple.
It's not just willpower.
Yeah.
It's a lot of hard work and a lot of navigating that often is really hard to do on your own.
Yeah.
And clinical depression, etc., is going to be a huge roadblock.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So, on the subject of our thoughts becoming our reality, essentially, what can you tell us, Meka, about Mary Baker Eddy?
Oh, yeah. She was this very educated woman that revolutionized healthcare.
Really?
No, sorry. Got it mixed up. She's the founder of Christian Science.
Yep.
Okay.
What can you tell us about Christian Science?
I know that I've just mostly heard stories of children dying because the parents refused healthcare for treatable illness.
Is that Christian Science in a nutshell?
That's the stories I've heard. I don't normally get into those sorts of things.
Okay. Yeah, it's one of those things where, for the purpose of our conversation, this is the aspect of Christian Science that we're going to be focusing on, because we're talking about healing through thinking and through belief. Faith comes into it very clearly in this situation. And this is one of the most common critiques about Christian Science as a faith. This isn't a critique about Christianity as a whole.
Oh, no.
No. This is something very, very different. In some ways, the whole concept of Christian Science is a misnomer, right? So there were a couple of things from this section that stood out to you, yes?
Yep.
What you got?
I mean, first, scientific. Mate, you can't just use a word because you like it and change the meaning completely.
Yeah.
I mean, you can. It's just going to be very confusing.
Yeah. It's going to make people think you've got a science background when you absolutely do not.
Yeah, and it's very confusing because I know many Christians who are scientific.
Yeah.
And then people are like, Christian Science. I'm like, no.
No.
Christians who believe in the scientific method and research.
Yeah. It's a completely different playing field.
Yeah.
There's this whole story in here about how she experienced all of these tragedies and all these sorrows, lost a couple of husbands, had to give up a child because she was poor, which kind of links back to our discussion about adoption in the previous episode. Yeah.
Yep.
Different physical ailments, and at some point it all changed for her, right? She experienced a spinal cord injury and was told that she was going to die, right? But then this is what happened, right? Lying on what was supposed to be her deathbed, Mary Baker Eddy opened her Bible and was led, she declared, by divine guidance to read these words from St. Matthew. Okay, I'm going to put on my best saint voice. And behold, they brought to him a man sick of the palsy, the palsy, lying on a bed. And Jesus said unto the sick of the palsy, Son, be of good cheer, thy sins be forgiven thee. Arise, take up thy bed, and go unto thine house. And he arose and departed to his house. These words of Jesus, she declared, produced within her such a strength, such a faith, such a surge of healing power, that she immediately got out of bed and walked.
So she didn't have a spinal cord injury.
Apparently. It couldn't have been a misdiagnosis.
Or a bruised spinal cord that healed after a bit of rest in bed.
Yeah, like, it had to have been those words and that strong
Absolutely.
faith she suddenly felt. And in the book it continues. That experience, Mrs. Eddy declared, was the falling apple that led me to the discovery of how to be well myself and how to make others so. I gained the scientific certainty that all causation was mind and every effect a mental phenomenon. Now, that goes back to one of the gripes that we have about so many self-help, personal development media, that it's like, I experienced this one thing and now I am wise. And not only am I wise, I am now going to spread this wisdom to others.
Yes.
It worked for me, so now I'm going to vomit it onto everyone else. It's like, but why?
And if you claim God made it happen too, it adds an extra strength and like authority to it.
Yeah, it's like, it kind of reminds me of that scene in The Matrix, you know?
Oh my god, I thought of The Matrix when she said that. A bit like when Neo gets information downloaded into his head.
Yeah, he doesn't have to do anything.
Yeah.
It just sort of happens.
Or is able to just fly because he believes he can fly.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like that moment where he goes, I know Kung Fu. It's like, who knew it could be that easy? It's like that's what happened to her here, right? But yes, this is what led to her becoming the founder and the high priestess of Christian Science. He makes it clear that he's not a Christian Scientist. So in this paragraph, he says, you are probably saying to yourself by now, this man Carnegie is proselytizing for Christian Science. No, you are wrong. I am not a Christian Scientist, but the longer I live, the more deeply I am convinced of the tremendous power of thought. As a result of many years spent in teaching adults, I know men and women can banish worry, fear, and various kinds of illnesses and can transform their lives by changing their thoughts. I know. I have seen such incredible transformations performed hundreds of times. I have seen them so often that I no longer wonder at them. Now, what I find very interesting as a former academic about this paragraph is that the pool that he is drawing his data from is adults that he has taught in his adult education programs.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I know that he says that he had such a wide variety of people from all different backgrounds and this and that, but we don't know enough about the situation to unpack the levels of privilege that were involved in here and the ins and outs of all of their experience. But still, this is not enough to say, like, this is definitely the truth, because in my classroom, I have seen all of these different things happen. It's like, okay,
great
dude.
Data set.
Yeah. And that's one of the problems with the book. So much of what he's presenting as truth is purely anecdotal. It's people he's spoken to. It's people he has read information from.
To be fair, that's a lot of the books we've looked at.
That is true. That is true. So the self-help gurus that are grifting people today can look back at books like this and go, well, it was fine then. It's fine now. I'm just going to say words. I'm just going to have ideas and present them as facts.
I think they truly believe it.
Yeah.
So, it's not quite grifting. It's like self-grifting and then grifting others through your
it's kind of a re-grifting.
Like cognitive dissonance at the start becomes a grift.
Yeah. But this also is not to just crap on the idea of having positive thoughts in a way that's going to help you heal yourself. Yeah. Again, it's the whole idea that you can do this without using medicine, without using any kind of treatments, without putting anything into your body that is, like a pharmaceutical. People who follow these kinds of faith-based healing tenets will often forego things like radiation or other treatments for cancer and so on.
I have some personal experience, and the reason I am quite critical.
Yeah.
Someone that we were very close friends with, were getting sick of modern medicine and decided to treat their cancer by faith. They died. It was a big part in my losing faith in that if this is drawing people into this sort of thing, then it was dangerous. And I think it affected some other people in their life as well, like that.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I have fibromyalgia, which I've spoken about before. It causes real pain. They can see it in scans, brain scans. It's there. It's real pain.
Yeah.
I went to the pain clinic. They talked about all of the neurology and how this all connects. Literally, me thinking and being more positive has reduced my pain and fatigue.
Yeah.
And that's where it does count. That's where it is evidence-based, where real evidence has been collected, where they've taken data and looked at it and looked at your physiology and how it actually does work. And being very specific about where it's useful and where it's not. And it can actually change outcomes in things like healing and things, stuff like that. So it is an aspect.
Yeah.
I don't want to shortchange that.
Yeah, absolutely.
It needs to just be extremes. Don't go to extremes.
Yeah.
Believing that your mindset has nothing to do with your health and believing it has everything to do with health are two ends of the spectrum where they're wrong.
Yeah. And I agree. It's about being aware of those extremes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And because a lot of this book.
Yeah. Even if we do take this very complex world of healing from physical, emotional pain and such, and simplify it to even our most day-to-day things. And again, I'm severely oversimplifying things here. When I have pain, when I feel like crap, when I have cramps or whatever, sometimes like doing something to just pep myself up emotionally will have a tremendous impact on how I feel within my body physically.
It's almost like our bodies created their own natural painkillers that we have had access to.
Yeah.
That have some effect.
Yeah.
But not all the effects.
Yeah. And I know that there are a lot of people who benefit tremendously from like targeting their pain on an emotional level through things like, talking to their wounded kneecaps and things like that, showing appreciation for different parts of their body and like verbalizing that appreciation. And it might seem quite woo-woo, and there's a context for everything, right?
Yeah.
But I tell you what, if it helps you feel better, rock and roll.
Yep.
It's when you're relying only on those things and forcing other people to rely only on those things that I'm like, yep, no,
And using your platform to push and reject modern medicine or things that might save people's lives or really help people's quality of life.
Yeah.
Then you're doing harm.
Yeah.
I'm all about doesn't cause harm, go for it. Don't care. Like, a lot of stuff just makes people feel better because they believe it. Whatever. Great. In fact, use it.
Yeah.
When you start causing harm, that's when I need to step in and, like, say something.
Yeah. And that's when we can even look at examples of, people like Belle Gibson, for example. I mean, her platform was more about healing through natural foods, but it was all a huge con. Like, there was an element of positive thinking, but the main thing was foregoing traditional treatments for cancer, similar to, her whole thing was like, I cured my brain cancer with natural foods and through nutrition. And it's like, you never had cancer.
Oh.
You just have nice eyebrows. This is why people look at you and go, she looks so healthy and glowing. She's so inspirational. And if you're not familiar with the Belle Gibson story, the whole pantry story, it's definitely one to dive into because she caused a lot of harm to a lot of people and owes a lot of people money as a result as well. Yeah, it's a horrifying set of circumstances. And again, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a scientist, but there's plenty of research that shows the effect of stress on the body and how harmful it can be. So doing things that will reduce our stress can definitely benefit us on a physical level.
Well, he does actually have an example after this that is a little more reasonable, and I do think there is some important takeaway from it.
Yep.
He had a student who basically was having a mental breakdown from all the stress and...
Not a research student, though, because researchers are too busy to have stress.
Of course.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
And I'm not going to go into the entire story, but basically even going away on a tropical holiday to Florida didn't make it go away because his mind was still with him.
Yeah, and it's Florida. That's where Florida man lives.
This is Florida in the 1940s.
Oh, okay.
Or probably earlier.
Right.
Not sure you're allowed tropical holidays during the war. But kind of his dad wrote to him and said, look, mate, you got to like change your perspective. Got to think differently. And I do believe in some of this.
Yep.
Like to a point, you can't make actual real life things that are going to be a problem go away by thinking about it different.
Yeah.
But certainly, he says here, I was wanting to change the whole world and everyone in it. A lot of us have this desire to make a change in the world.
Yep.
And I think it's a lot of what many of us are aiming to do.
Yeah, especially from an activist perspective.
Exactly.
Yep.
And he says, when the only thing that needed changing was the focus of the lens of the camera, which was my mind. And that I do think is really important. It has really helped me to feel more settled in that my small changes do count.
Yep.
Like, I shouldn't be there worrying and stressing that I haven't completely fixed everything yet. That's ridiculous, and it's something that you can't do.
Yeah.
But by me helping one person, two people, a handful of people to live a better life, that does count.
Yes.
And that has made me happier to change my lens and go, no, like, stop feeling unworthy that you can't do anything. If you can say a kind word to someone, you can change someone's entire day.
Yes.
And that is worth something.
Yeah.
He also says, this is the student, when moments of uneasiness try to creep in, as they will for everyone's life, I tell myself to get that camera back in focus and everything is okay. I go, everything is okay, depends on the focus, but in these particular sort of worries, yeah. So these are the things you should take away when reading something like this, where I really disagree with the way he talks about the earlier stuff. It could send people on the wrong track. The Christian Science and the, like, you can fix your health. Things like this, that is where it really counts. And because he had all these, like, ulcers and things, which you get, like, actually, I think they're just proving the ulcers from stress, but...
All right, okay.
Like, there's a lot of stress health issues that can happen.
Okay, yeah.
And so, yes, your physical health can be affected by your mindset in situations like this. And so I think it's good to point out what good takeaways there are in these chapters.
Yes. The little nuggets that float to the surface.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then he fucks it up again.
Oh, shit. Of course.
I know. It's like, what? With the toxic positivity that comes from this fake it till you make it culture that's so pervasive in personal development. On page 122, this is still in the 8 words that can transform your life chapter, he writes, William James, who has never been topped in his knowledge of practical psychology, once made this observation. Action seems... Does that sound like how he would talk? Action seems to follow feeling, but really action and feeling go together. And by regulating the action, which is under the more direct control of the will, we can indirectly regulate the feeling, which is not. In other words, you're looking at me like, what?
No, there was something in there that made sense.
Okay, well, he translates for us.
Okay.
He says, in other words, William James tells us that we cannot instantly change our emotions just by making up our minds to, but we can change our actions. And that when we change our actions, we will automatically change our feelings. It's that word, automatically. Anyway, thus, he explains, the sovereign voluntary path to cheerfulness, if your cheerfulness be lost, is to sit up cheerfully and act and speak as if cheerfulness were already there, see?
Okay.
I added the C at the end. Now, I wrote fuck this in the margin here, so this next paragraph must be worth reading. Does that simple trick work? Try it yourself. Okay, I'm starting to see why I... Put a big, broad, honest-to-God smile on your face. Throw back your shoulders. Take a good deep breath and sing a snatch of song.
Snatch.
My neck, my back. If you can't sing, whistle. If you can't whistle, hum. You'll quickly discover what William James was talking about. That it is physically impossible, and that's in italics, physically impossible to remain blue or depressed while you are acting out the symptoms of being radiantly happy.
Oh my god.
Bullshit!
I spent the first 26 years of my life putting on a smile, and people are like, oh, but you're always so happy. I'm like, no.
Your comedy mask turned into your tragedy mask immediately. This is the thing. It's like, no.
It's the opposite of my experience.
Yeah, mine as well.
When I let myself show my sadness is when I actually was able to start healing it.
Yeah. But this whole idea, and it's emphasized by saying it's physically impossible to remain blue or depressed while you're pretending not to be.
It's so 1940s. Like early 20th century, like...
Yeah, da, 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 da,
Great
da.
Depression? What Great Depression? Just smile!
Yeah. And diving into that is basically the whole purpose of our podcast.
Yes.
Yeah. So I don't know. The 8 words that can transform your life. Again, those 8 words. Our life is what our thoughts make it. In some contexts, we need to be really mindful of the impact of our thinking on our physical and emotional well-being. But to say that that's all that matters, that, mindset is everything, no. Causes harm.
Very victim blamey too.
Yes. All right. Meka.
Yeah.
How you doing, buddy?
Are we done yet?
Are you worried? Are you ready to just start living?
My brain is literally thinking black and white, like old black and white cartoons, like... like yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Just
that's pretty much my inner landscape. Just chaos. All right. Chapter 17. If you have a lemon, make a lemonade. I like the way it's written.
Not 2, just 1.
Yes. No. Make a single lemonade. The thing that stood out to me most in this chapter is something that comes up so much when we talk about disability.
Mm-hmm.
Oh. Now, you are disabled.
Yeah. I never know whether to call myself chronically ill or disabled, but...
Yeah. We have a lot of very close acquaintances that are disabled in more visible ways than we are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so we've engaged in this particular conversation a lot.
Yeah.
So, of course, the expression, when life hands you lemons, make lemonade, is just a cheerful way of saying, when something bad happens, turn it into a positive, or find something that you can make out of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, which I endeavor to do whenever I can, whenever it's appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
So, this is what he writes. As I have traveled up and down and back and forth across this nation, the U.S., time after time, it has been my privilege... See, that's one of those things that should be in italics and bolded. It has been my privilege. Okay. To meet dozens of men and women who have demonstrated their power to turn a minus into a plus. The late William Bolitho, author of 12 Against the Gods, put it like this. The most important thing in life is not to capitalize on your gains. Any fool can do that. The really important thing is to profit from your losses. That requires intelligence, and it makes the difference between a man of sense and a fool. Okay. Bolitho uttered these words after he had lost a leg in a railway accident. But I know a man who lost both legs and turned his minus into a plus. His name is Ben Forston. I met him in a hotel elevator in Atlanta, Georgia. As I stepped into the elevator, I noticed this cheerful-looking man. Okay, now, this is where we get into the description of why he was so inspirational. Mm-hmm. I noticed this cheerful-looking man who had both legs missing, sitting in a wheelchair in a corner of the elevator. When the elevator stopped at his floor, he asked me pleasantly if I would step to one corner so he could manage his chair better. So sorry, he said, to inconvenience you. And a deep, heartwarming smile lighted his face as he said it. When I left the elevator and went to my room, I could think of nothing but this cheerful cripple. So I hunted him up and asked him to tell me his story.
This is the 80s revision. They knew not to use that word.
That's definitely an expression that we would have to change. That said, I know people who use the word cripple as a self-identifying marker in a way that I can't criticize, because it's like, no, this is you describing your own experience, like, rock and roll. But the thing that's so bothersome about that is that it's the first example in this section of other people with visible disabilities or ailments that from an outside perspective make them seem like they should be really pathetic and feel sorry for themselves, but instead they're inspirational. It's that I word that gets thrown around so much, you know? You know, I have friends, we both have friends who use wheelchairs, for example, or who use other forms of mobility aids. And, you know, I've had members of my family in that situation as well.
Yeah.
And when people will act like your default is patheticism, and that any reason that you can find to smile is just that much more profound, and that we should all learn from you. Here we are, these fools walking around on two legs, dancing and kicking our heels together, and we're complaining about stuff that just doesn't matter. But look at you, pathetic one. Like, you're doing so well. It's like, come on, we need to come off of this.
It doesn't just damage the people with disabilities either. It damages the person he's trying to inspire by saying, like, you shouldn't, like, to feel bad about anything, you should feel guilty because even, like, these people doing way worse than you are able to be happy. So pull your socks up.
Yeah. And it's that whole habit of downward comparisons that is not a sustainable way for people to bolster their own self-esteem, their own confidence, and such and such. On one hand, it can be like shifting your perspective to understand how good you have it in some areas of your life. Fine. But the way it's framed in this book is like pity, pity, pity.
Yeah.
And even like goes as far as sharing these stories of people who like magically cure their depression by spending more time with more pitiful people. And helping them and being their savior.
Ugh.
Yeah. And it's like, come on. I've known disabled people who were complete a-holes. And you know what? That's their right.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean I want to hang out with these people or I'm going to say, oh, but you're so inspirational. It's like, no.
People are people.
People are people. And if you want to find someone inspirational because they've done some amazing thing, rock and roll. You know, that person using a mobility device may have like 3 PhDs or have raised 7 children or have like done some very amazing things in social enterprise or any number of great and inspirational things. But if the thing that you see that should be holding them back is the thing that you're going to find inspirational, it's like, come on, we can do better than that.
Yeah, I really do find inspiration in stories written by people with disability who have overcome challenges.
Yeah.
Normally sometimes it's overcome it in just that sort of mental way of having a good life now. They're offering themselves for that as well. There's a huge difference.
Yes, exactly.
And all this guy knows is, oh, he was smiley and was nice to me on an elevator.
Yeah.
Like, he doesn't know what's going on.
Yeah. It's like he could have been smiling because he just like smacked a chicken in the face or did something really dickish and was feeling good about it. It's like, you have no idea. This guy could be a total jerk.
Or protection. You have to be nice to people in public if you don't want to get attacked or, like, treated badly.
Yeah, yeah. And this whole idea of downward comparison links very well to the chapter that stood out for me the most, that being chapter 18, How to Cure Depression in 14 Days.
The answer is here.
Yeah. I mean, like my course of SSRIs, I don't know about you, has been much longer than 14 days.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that I'm saying that everyone needs to just take antidepressants and all of that. I'm not diving into all of that right now. But how dare anyone claim to have the cure for something as serious as depression? And we can't even say like, oh, it was just a different time then, you know, we talked about things very differently. It's like, no. It's like that may be true, but this is still how so many self-help gurus frame depression as a kind of thing that you can just flick a switch and go, it's gone. We've manifested it away.
And it's so dangerous because if you try it and fail, you're going to feel like there's no hope. Like, there's nothing, like, you're the problem. You're the loser.
Yeah, yeah. So there are a couple of examples out of this chapter I want to sink our cute little teeth into. Well, my teeth are tiny. I don't know about yours. Because I was born teething. Did you know that?
No.
Yeah, I was one of those freak babies who had like little little nubbly things when I was born. That's why my teeth are so small today. Anyway, ADHD moment. He tells a story of a little boy who was taken in by a family. You know, he was orphaned, taken in by this family, and then he started school, but was getting picked on a lot, was getting called orphan brat, and was generally having a pretty bad time.
Rude.
Yeah. Bullying is shit.
Yeah. I say no.
Yeah. Hot take. Bullying, bad. We know like. So he quotes him saying, "I never cried at school, but I used to bawl it out at home. Then one day, Mrs. Lofton gave me some advice that did away with all troubles and worries and turned my enemies into friends. She said, 'Ralph,' his name was Ralph, 'they won't tease you and call you an orphan brat anymore if you will get interested in them and see how much you can do for them.' I took her advice. I studied hard. And though I soon headed the class, I was never envied because I went out of my way to help them." Okay.
I went out of my way to help them. Oh, I can't do a Ralph voice, damn it. I thought I could.
Ralph Wiggum?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's who I was thinking of too. "I helped several of the boys write their themes and essays. I wrote complete debates for some of the boys. One lad was ashamed to let his folks know that I was helping him, so he used to tell his mother he was going possum hunting. Then he would come to Mr. Lofton's." Oh, okay, Mrs. Lofton was the mom who took him in. Okay. "Then he would come to Mr. Lofton and tie his dogs up in the barn while I helped him with his lessons. I wrote book reviews for one lad, and I spent several evenings helping one of the girls on her math." All right.
The story of academic misconduct.
Well, see, this is the thing. It goes on talking about like what happened with these boys and helping other people. And after that, he was never bullied in school again.
Yeah, because he's a doormat.
Exactly. But see, this is the thing. Remember, this is the guy who wrote How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Win friends?
One of the yeah. One of the key like themes in that book is the whole like, you know, if you want people to like you, just do things for them. And it's very manipulative as well as self-defeating. Because it's like, I just want people to like me. It's like, come on now.
Sad.
Anyway. So he continues. He writes, "Death struck our neighborhood. 2 elderly farmers died, and 1 woman was deserted by her husband. I was the only male in 4 families. I helped these widows for 2 years on my way to and from school. I stopped at their farms, cut wood for them, milked their cows, and fed and watered their stock. I was now blessed instead of cursed. I was accepted as a friend by everyone. They showed me their real feelings when I returned home from the Navy." Yeah, so this kid, like, basically spends his life just doing more and more for people, and he is then praised by the author saying he knows how to win friends, and he also knows how to conquer worry and enjoy life. It's like,
The test is when you stop doing things for people or you need something. That's when you find out whether they actually liked you or whether they were using you.
yeah. Or whether you were just pushing all your aid onto them when they didn't want it.
Or that.
In some contexts. Some people make it their entire personality to give, do, whether people want that or not.
Yes. And that can cause just as many issues.
Yeah.
As being completely unhelpful.
Yeah, and that's not winning friends and influencing people. That's pushing people the hell away from you.
We all know, I think, someone like that.
Yeah, we all know someone like that. Doing things for other people can be very fulfilling.
Absolutely.
It can be very, very uplifting. It can help you zoom out of your own woe is me experiences, or even the very real struggles you're going through, and gain a wider perspective on what's going on, not just by way of downward comparisons, by saying, oh, but other people have it so much worse, you should be fine.
Yeah.
Like all those, pathetic people just waddling around with no purpose in life, blah, blah, blah. And it's something that I find great satisfaction in. When it is merited, when those actions are well placed, and it gives me feelings of joy to fight against injustice, for example, within activist communities. But it's not about becoming a people pleaser.
Yes.
There's a section here where he writes, "Here is the most astonishing statement that I ever read from the pen of a great psychiatrist. This statement was made by Alfred Adler. He used to say to his melancholia patients, 'You can be cured in 14 days if you follow this prescription. Try to think every day how you can please someone.'" We've just explained why, becoming a people pleaser is not the path to happiness. So yeah, things get even darker when we look at more information that he provides from Alfred Adler, something from his book. He talks about melancholia, which of course today would be referred to as, depression and things like that. And content warning, because this does include discussions about suicide. He writes, "Melancholiacs are often inclined to revenge themselves by committing suicide, and the doctor's first care is to avoid giving them an excuse for suicide. I myself try to relieve the whole tension by proposing to them as a first rule in treatment, never do anything you don't like." Oh, wow.
So in touch.
Yeah. This seems to be very modest, but I believe that it goes to the root of the whole trouble. If a melancholiac is able to do anything he wants, whom can he accuse? What has he got to revenge himself for? "If you want to go to the theater," I tell him, "or to go on a holiday, do it."
Oh, what the...
If you find on the way that you don't want to, stop it. It is the best situation anyone could be in. It gives a satisfaction to his striving for superiority. He is like God and can do what he pleases.
But does he fund these things?
Yeah, exactly. Come on.
I've recently had contact with an out-of-touch doctor like this, and it put my headspace back so far.
Yeah. It's this whole idea that...
Those of us in poverty and in bad situations, just choose it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, it's a choice. Your sadness is a choice. You just need to do more of the things you love. You just need more #self-care, which is always more expensive than real self-care.
Yeah.
And then you can just mindset your way out of wanting to commit suicide. I don't give you permission.
Yeah.
To be sad, to be a melancholiac. I'm reading this now in Rachel Hollis's voice, of course. If you want to go on a holiday, do it. It's like, come on.
Yeah.
No.
I got accused of making myself sicker because I didn't come to see him for so long, and I was just like, I didn't have money. And he's like, what do you mean? I'm like, your fee is a month's worth of groceries. And he's just like, what? No, that can't. He was just so judgmental about it.
Oh my gosh. When you run into these situations in healthcare settings, it's that much more infuriating.
Because their one job that a computer can't do is relate to people. Like, the AI is coming for your job, fool.
Yeah. And it also bolsters this idea that depression is inherently selfish.
Yeah.
That it's about you being too concerned with your own well-being or your own misery and not thinking about the people around you. You're not making your grief and your trauma comfortable enough for the people around you. How dare you?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And acting as if what you need to do is have more important things, that being other people, to focus on so you can get out of your own head.
I've unfortunately seen too much of the outcomes of this approach as well.
Yeah.
And it is not a healthy person, healthy families, healthy relationships.
Yeah. It goes back to the lose yourself. Forget about yourself. Think about other people. It's about everyone else. It's explaining so much about, like, boomers and a lot of those attitudes.
And to quote him in the other part of the book, nature abhors a vacuum. And when you lose yourself, and narcissists come and fill that vacuum.
Yeah, narcissists look out for people who are willing to sacrifice themselves.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So much.
Ugh. Here's a paragraph that illustrates this a bit more. He writes, "A third of the people who rush to psychiatrists for help could probably cure themselves if they could only do as Margaret Yates did, get interested in helping others. My idea? No. That is approximately what Carl Jung said. And he ought to know, if anybody does. He said, about 1/3 of my patients are suffering from no clinically definable neurosis, but from the senselessness and emptiness of their lives. To put it another way, they're trying to thumb a ride through life, and the parade passes them by. So they rush to a psychiatrist with their petty, senseless, useless lives. Having missed the boat, they stand on the wharf, blaming everyone except themselves, and demanding that the world cater to their self-centered desires."
Oh my God.
This immediately took me back to an incident that I had when I was living in Melbourne, in Naarm. I went to a doctor because I was, like, freaking out over a bunch of things. A cousin of mine had just passed away. I was in an emotionally abusive relationship. I was probably in my luteal phase of PMDD at the time. I was just a mess. And you know what this guy said to me? After a couple of minutes of listening to me talk about what was going on, he goes, "Are you married?" It's like, "No." It's like, "Do you have any kids?" It's like, "No." And then he just kind of, like, you know, adjusts himself in his chair and he goes, "One thing that often happens with women who aren't married and don't have children is they find other things to worry about that just aren't as important." And I was like, what? And then he wrote me a prescription for Xanax, which I never filled.
Is this a psychiatrist?
This was a GP who I was seeing in order to get a referral to a mental health professional. And this GP was someone who I found on the Beyond Blue website.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Did you report him?
No, I should have, because he also pressured me into getting a pap smear that day.
Oh. No.
Yeah. So there's something up with that guy. And I don't mean like, oh, like, pap smears are bad. He pressured me into getting a pap smear. And you know what he said as soon as we finished? He goes, "You have the cleanest cervix I've ever seen." In this really weird, pervy way.
Ew.
Like he was paying me some beautiful compliment. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like, this is not what I came in here for.
No.
And I don't want you commenting on my lower regions.
Yeah.
And then he tried to put me on the Sacred Heart diet, which is just the cabbage soup diet.
What the
It was the weirdest thing. But anyway, so my depression was my fault because I didn't have anything worth worrying about in my life. I was being self-centered.
You should know your place, woman.
Yeah. Have some kids. It'll be fun.
You are to breed and be so busy with your children that you have no time to worry.
Yeah. Have you read this book by Dale Carnegie?
Have you thought of following the advice of old rich white men?
It's like, you know what? That hadn't occurred to me.
They've got good lives. Why don't you just do what they do?
Yeah. And I think this is a good point to start winding down the discussion by reflecting again on the concept of worry and how it's not necessary to eliminate worry or eliminate anxiety and depression in order to, quote unquote, start living.
I think it's also important to draw the parallels between what Dale Carnegie writes in this book and modern Stoicism philosophies. Like, Stoicism's been around since ancient Greece, but the kind of more modern interpretation is kind of like only you control how you see things, and so like keeping those emotions back and not reacting with emotion to situations will make everything fine. And there's not a lot in it that I know of that is actually about being allowed to feel emotion and work through it.
Yeah.
And I don't hate everything to do with it. I think it just is a part of the way you can behave in society and is missing quite a few bits that you need to be a healthy person overall.
Yeah.
And that goes for this book also. Like, there are some bits in there that you can take away, but there's some stuff that can be very damaging if you go with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think it's a bit of a minefield, this one.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's super useful as a current self-help book.
Yeah.
However, it's been very helpful in me understanding some people in my life, some older people in my life.
Yeah.
And why they might have taken the route they have to dealing with the stresses of life.
Yeah.
And their worries.
Yeah. And one thing I will say about this book also is I found it really interesting that he did include stories, insights from people like Booker T. Washington and George Washington Carver and like other black people. I was like, wait, what? Huh? Wait, so if this guy was doing this in, I don't know if that was in the original version or if that was in the 80s version, but like that's still hardly done today in modern self-help literature. I was like, what? Even like tells a story about a guy who was about to be lynched, and I mean, that was problematic in its own ways because it's like this man was being lynched, but then he was able to prove to these guys that he was a good man, and like, oh yeah, you know what, we're not going to lynch you because you're one of the good ones. It's like, yeah. But anyway, let's close it up by talking about our own ways to navigate, not eliminate, worry, depression, and anxiety.
Yeah. Can't go through all of them right now, but I guess a few quick notes. I try and remember when I'm worrying that things will probably be all right tomorrow, that I might just be stressed out of feeling having a hard day. You have situations come up. And now, most of the time, I'm able to remember, like, you know, just today, it's okay. You can worry today, you can feel bad today, and then we're going to go to sleep and we're going to wake up and try again.
Yep.
And that works pretty well for me. That normally actually makes the worry calm down quite a bit, unless it is a real problem. Like, there's things that can't just fix by not worrying about them.
Yeah.
Like, the bills not being paid isn't going away because I stopped worrying about it.
You're attracting those bills into your life.
Yeah.
Hashtag the secret.
Compartmentalizing, like giving time to worry in the day and then being done with it for the day.
For the day, yes.
For the day. Like, you have to continue to address the things that worry is there. And I guess we need to be careful with what terminology is being used here. Like, rumination, not super healthy. It normally makes it worse.
Yeah.
Worry or concern is important. There is an indicator to pay attention to things that it could be a mental health thing. It could be even a physical health thing. It can be real life problems or social problems that do need to be looked at. If it wasn't for me doing a fair bit of worrying about social stuff as a neurodivergent person, I might not have learnt certain skills by... it is actually part of that self-reflection. Doing that self-reflection, you could call that worry. Like,
Yep.
I am going over it, and you have to be careful not to fall into rumination where it then just becomes... You change the situation in your head. The more you go over it, it actually distorts. So, yeah, letting yourself be concerned with how you performed in social situations, fine, helps you learn.
Yeah.
But these days, I mostly go with the things will be bright again one day.
Yeah.
Might not be tomorrow. It might not be this year, but I know things are going to get better.
Yeah.
There's so many great things to enjoy in life.
Yeah.
There's beautiful things to appreciate, and there's lovely moments, and just not catastrophizing and focusing on them as the core of my focus
Yeah.
has helped a lot.
Yeah.
So what about you, Leslie? Have you got any tips for folk or things that have worked for you?
Yeah. I will frame it as things that have worked for me because, again, your mileage may vary. I'm only an expert in my lived experience as Leslie Crudevilla Garcia.
Not coming in here with evidence and receipts to back it all up.
It's Leslie Science. Leslie and Science. I mean, what you said about catastrophizing is important. And as a person who suffers from premenstrual dysphoric disorder, PMDD, that's kind of the mother of my worry a lot of the time. And one thing that I'm always very mindful of is where I am in my menstrual cycle when my mind starts to spiral and tell myself all of these lies or exaggerated things about things. And I'm like, oh, shit, it's day 12 of my cycle. This is PMDD speaking. This isn't Leslie. This is PMDD. And recognizing that that moment will pass. It doesn't invalidate my real concerns, but it helps me when I can recognize my patterns. That relieves the pressure tremendously from having to figure out how to think my way out of it.
Yeah.
It makes it easier to just put those thoughts in a box for a while and say, okay, I'm just putting you on the shelf for now. We'll hang out later. Right now, you just need to hush up for a little bit. And scheduling time for worry and rumination. You know, when there's a huge stressor in my life, I can choose to spend all friggin' day and night thinking about it, or I can say, you know what, from 3:15 to 3:30, I'm going to just think about this one thing, and I'm going to leave it for that period of time. Now, that's very theoretical because it doesn't always work. When I schedule time to think about this thing I don't want to think about for the whole day, sometimes I'm just exhausted, and those stressors can creep in other areas. But that's when I give myself a tremendous amount of grace. I'm like, you know what, Leslie? This is tough. It's okay to recognize that. You don't have to fall into the hashtag transcendence trap. It's like, no, you're looking at everything as an outside observer. This isn't an actual reality. This isn't part of your life. It's like being praised for bypassing things that actually need to be addressed. I'm not into that. I am not into that at all. Sometimes when I'm really worried about something that I can't take immediate action on, I bring myself back to, okay, where am I right now? What is my physical location? What is my body language? Am I hungry? the whole hungry, angry, lonely, tired thing as well comes into play sometimes. But if I recognize that there are like little adjustments I can make just to give myself a fighting chance to pull myself out of a mood, that can start with that processing of the worry. For example, I often find that the danger zone for me is when I'm first waking up in the morning.
Yeah.
Yeah. When my thoughts are going all over the place, having this tug of war with my internal to-do list. It's like, no, let's think about this. No, let's think about that. Let's think about that thing that some person in the 3rd grade said to you, or something that you did at a party when you were 16. And it's like, what? And it took me a long time to figure out that the one thing that I had to do in those moments is sit up. It's like, sit up, get your head off of the pillow. That doesn't cure anything, but it helps to slow down all that chatter and go, oh, okay, so I was in that weird headspace where I kind of forgot what my current reality actually is, but now I can start thinking about, getting up, having a shower, getting dressed, and starting my day. For me, my techniques for navigating worry, anxiety, and depression are very contextual. It's not like one thing works for every situation, Like my SSRI that I take every day to manage some of the physiological sides of things, that's not going to rescue me from living under systemic oppression.
Really? No. If you just smiled, it would go away.
Yeah. Just think about the positives of,
Now I'm thinking
racism. And again, these are just in situations where there isn't something that I can immediately action. This is the kind of like worry that we're talking about. Like, yeah, if we're talking about a more action-focused thing, it's like, all right, if I'm worried about this particular thing, if I'm worried about systemic oppression, there are action-focused steps that I take when there is something that I have some control over in that moment, but not everything is controllable. And that doesn't mean we just dismiss it and just choose not to worry about it. It's like, okay, sometimes things you can just put on a shelf. Sometimes like they're going to be sitting there like crapping all over your face and you just have to work around it. All this to say as well that I don't like throwing around words like mindfulness because in a lot of contexts it's kind of lost its meaning. But for me, deliberate acts of mindfulness are crucial. Deliberate mindfulness practices where I can keep myself grounded in the present moment, looking at what is in my physical environment, engaging all of my senses when I'm doing things like taking a shower or even just sitting in meditation, are a way to take the edge off of those things.
Yeah.
It's not a cure, and I don't advocate using it as a way to bypass actual work that needs to be done. And also watching a lot of Smosh.
And that those methods look different for different people too.
Yeah.
It's a big thing that's missed in mindfulness.
Yeah. And being of service to people through activism and things like that is a good way for me to zoom out and be part of someone else's, is a good way for me to zoom out and recognize not just that other people have it worse, but that my concerns are just this small part of this massive world picture. And that I don't have to stay on that one little spot, and I can be part of movements that will help other people as well.
I find that as well. My only danger is sometimes getting lost in it, never getting back to me. Throwing myself headlong into it to the point I totally neglect myself.
Yeah, and we've discussed at length why that is not the key to stopping worrying.
Yeah.
So much to say about all of this as usual. But let's finish off this chapter with a quote. Meka, what have you got for us?
I've got a quote here from Stella Young. Stella Young was, we'll start with comedian. Mm-hmm. That's a funny woman.
Yeah, she's great.
But
Was
also
great.
very much an activist for disability rights, feminist, journalist. She advocated against like these inauthentic inspiration porn.
Yeah.
In regards to disability.
Yeah.
And so this quote is from her. That quote, "The only disability in life is a bad attitude. The reason that's bullshit is no amount of smiling at a flight of stairs has ever made it turn into a ramp. No amount of standing in the middle of a bookshelf and radiating a positive attitude is going to turn all those books into Braille."
So true.
And yeah, I love that. It's what we've been talking about today.
Yeah.
Like the difference between reality and this sort of fantasy world that is painted in a lot of these books.
And one thing I'm going to put in the show notes for sure is her TED Talk from 2014. "I'm not your inspiration. Thank you very much."
Yes.
It's such a good one. I love it so much. All right. Well, thank you, Meka, for sharing that with us.
Thanks, Leslie. And how can people find us?
You can find us through my website, leslievcoaching.com, or my Instagram, leslievcoaching, which is also linked to the website, Leslie with an IE, for goodness sake. And yeah, Instagram is where I post my shenanigans, our shenanigans, and such. And yeah, send us a message. Tell us what you want us to talk about. Tell us what you liked about something we've done or said. What you think maybe we should reconsider.
Please do. I love feedback.
Yeah, I'll forward that straight to Meka to process and give back to me.
I like to reflect.
Yes. And if you have listened this far and you're like, you know what? I really need a life coach. Come to me. Book a free consultation through my website. We can work together in person here in Mianjin or online. So yeah, get in touch. Show us some love. We'd love to hear from you.
Thanks.
Yeah. And see you in chapter 10. Wow. Ooh. We better make that a good one.
We're doing it, Leslie.
We're doing it. We've got a podcast. All right. Let's go get some lunch, Meka.
Oh, so hungry.
Yeah.
Bye.